Imagine being trapped in a cage, not just by steel bars, but by the ghosts of your own past. Every time you close your eyes, you hear them. The laughter of children, the soft voice of a woman who once loved you. But then, just as quickly, the laughter turns to screams. And no matter how much you try to drown them out, they never stop. For Chris Watts, prison isn't just punishment. It's something much worse. It's a slow, psychological unraveling, a never-ending replay of the night he became the most hated man in America. He had it all. A beautiful wife. 2 little girls who looked at him like he was their world. A baby boy on the way. To everyone who knew him, he was the picture of a loving husband and a devoted father. But behind that suburban dream was a lie so sinister, so cold, that even the most ruthless criminals despise him. August 13, 2018. It started as a quiet night in the Watts family home. But somewhere in the early morning hours, Chris Watts made a decision that would shatter everything. First, it was Sean N., the woman who had given him everything, love, loyalty, a family. As she lay in bed, still carrying the unborn son who would never take his first breath, she never saw it coming. Then, his daughters. Bella. Celeste. 2 little girls who trusted their father with their lives, only for him to take them away in the most unthinkable way. And what did he do after? Did he panic? Did he break down in horror at what he had done? No. He cleaned up. He covered his tracks. He went to work like nothing happened. But what he didn't realize was that the truth always comes out. And now, locked away in a tiny prison cell, stripped of the perfect life he so desperately wanted to escape from. There's only one question left to ask: does Chris Watts truly feel remorse, or is he just another cold-blooded killer who got caught? Stick around. Because what you're about to hear might just change everything you think you know about Chris Watts. If you think this is the end of Chris Watts' story, you're wrong. What happens behind those prison walls will shock you even more. Hit subscribe and stay with us, because the real nightmare is just beginning. Chris Watts thought he knew what fear was. That moment when the police knocked on his door, the suffocating pressure of interrogation, the cold steel of handcuffs around his wrists. He thought that was fear. But true fear? That came the moment he stepped through the gates of Dodge Correctional Institution, a place where men like him don't just serve time. They live in fear. Gone was the well-manicured neighborhood. Gone were the friendly smiles of his coworkers. Gone was his perfect lie. Now, he was just inmate 674796. The first thing he noticed? The silence. Not the kind of silence he could control, like when he tuned out his family's voices while texting his mistress. No, this was the kind of silence that wrapped around him like a noose. A silence filled with unspoken threats. Because in prison, there's one rule that everyone knows: child killers don't survive long. The second he walked in, the other inmates knew who he was. They had seen his face on the news, read about what he did. To them, he wasn't just a criminal. He was a monster. And in a place like this, monsters get what they deserve. Chris Watts was immediately placed in protective custody, not for his safety, but to prevent the bloodbath that would have followed if he set foot in the general population. So they locked him away. Alone. A small cell. 4 gray walls. A thin mattress. A steel toilet. No escape. But the real punishment? The silence followed him inside. For the first time since the murders, there was no distraction. No mistress. No lies to tell. No fake smiles to give. Just him, and the one thing he had been running from. His own mind. Did he regret what he had done? Did he feel the crushing weight of guilt? The unbearable sorrow of losing his family? Or was it something else? Was Chris Watts truly remorseful, or was this just self-pity? Because in that cold, lifeless cell, there were no cameras to perform for. No police to manipulate. No reporters to play the victim for. There was only the truth. And the truth was something Chris Watts had never been able to face. Do you think Chris Watts truly feels remorse? Or is he just mourning the life he lost? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to know what really goes on behind those prison walls, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, this story is far from over. They say time moves differently in prison. Hours stretch into days. Days dissolve into weeks. And soon, you lose track of everything, except the silence. For Chris Watts, every morning begins the same way. At exactly 4 a.m., long before the sun rises, a loud buzzer jolts him awake. Not that he sleeps much. Inmates like him rarely do. His breakfast is already waiting. A metal tray slid through a slot in his door, no human contact necessary. Scrambled eggs, a piece of toast, maybe a carton of milk. Nothing special. Nothing personal. This is his life now. No early morning workouts in his garage. No happy goodbyes to his daughters before work. Just 4 walls, a metal bunk, and the weight of his own thoughts. By 6 a.m., he's assigned his daily task. Some days, he scrubs prison floors, pushing a mop in silence while guards watch his every move. Other days, he wipes down tables in an empty cafeteria, his presence ignored, his existence barely acknowledged. The work is mindless. Repetitive. Designed to break men like him. But the real punishment? The loneliness. He doesn't eat with other inmates. He doesn't stand in line with them. His meals, his recreation, his entire existence, kept separate from the men who would gladly tear him apart. Because no matter what crimes they've committed, even the worst of the worst despise a child killer. So does Chris Watts have friends? There are whispers, stories of inmates who secretly talk to him. Some see him as a lost soul, a man who made a terrible mistake. Others? They play nice to get close. Because in prison, information is currency, and a man like Watts, he's nothing more than a paycheck waiting to be cashed in. And then there are the ones who don't even pretend. He hears them. Their voices echoing down the halls, calling him a coward, a monster, worse than the scum beneath their feet. He doesn't respond. He never does. Because deep down, maybe he knows they're right. Isolation changes a person. The human mind isn't meant to exist in a cage, to be cut off from touch, from conversation, from the basic things that make us feel alive. For some, isolation is torture. A slow, agonizing descent into madness. But for Chris Watts, maybe it's exactly what he wants. Think about it. For years, he lived a double life. A man who smiled in family photos but fantasized about escaping it all. A man who pretended to love his wife while secretly texting his mistress under the dinner table. Chris Watts was never really there. And now? In a way, He got exactly what he wanted. No responsibilities. No expectations. No wife questioning him. No children calling his name. Just him. And the silence he created. But here's the real question. Is he finally at peace? Or is the isolation slowly rotting him from the inside out? Is Chris Watts truly suffering? Or did he find the escape he was always looking for? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see what happens next inside those prison walls, hit that subscribe button. Because this story? It's far from over. Chris Watts is alive, but for how long? Prison isn't just a place for punishment. It's a jungle. A world with its own rules, its own justice. And in that world, men like Watts don't last long. Since the day he walked into Dodge Correctional Institution, the whispers started. Dead man walking. He won't make it a year. Someone's gonna take care of him. At first, it was just taunts through the walls, a voice in the night, a name spat through the meal slot in his cell door. But then, the threats got real. Some inmates have nothing to lose. No family waiting. No parole in sight. And for them? Taking out a child killer? That's just another way to pass the time. Guards watch him closely. Not for his protection, but because they know what's coming. Does Chris Watts live in fear? Maybe. He rarely speaks. Never makes eye contact. When he walks through the prison halls, under armed escort, of course, his posture is different from the man he used to be. Back in Colorado, he was confident, calculated. A man who thought he could fool the world. But now? His shoulders are tense. His steps, quicker than before. His eyes scan the room, always watching, always waiting. In prison, killers walk freely. Rapists eat in the same cafeteria as thieves. The worst of society coexist under one roof. But there's one type of criminal that no one tolerates. Child murderers. They are the bottom of the food chain. The ones even the most hardened criminals despise. It doesn't matter what gang you belong to. It doesn't matter what race, what crime, what background. There's one unspoken rule inside those walls. If you hurt a child, you deserve worse than this cell. Chris Watts. He broke that rule. And the men around him? They know it. No one has attacked Watts, yet. But the fear is there. The rumors never stop. The glances from inmates, the low conversations that suddenly end when he walks by. The way the cafeteria grows quiet when he enters, the way men lean in just a little closer, their voices lower, their stares colder. They know who he is. They know what he did. And he knows they're waiting. Maybe it won't be today. Maybe not tomorrow. But one day, that door will open, and someone will be waiting on the other side. Chris Watts is alive, but for how long? How long can Chris Watts survive behind bars? Will he spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, or will his story end in violence? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to know what happens next inside those prison walls, subscribe. Because this is only the beginning. Chris Watts says he's sorry. From inside his prison cell, he writes about regret, pain, and redemption. He claims to have found God. He says he prays for forgiveness. But here's the question, does a man who murdered his entire family truly feel guilt, Or is he just playing a new role? Since his conviction, Watts has sent letter after letter, describing his so-called transformation. He says he's seen the light. That he spends his days reading the Bible. That he thinks about his family every single night. But read between the lines, and something feels off. In one letter, he breaks down the murders, not with grief, not with pain, but with cold, clinical details. I knew what I was doing. I knew it was wrong. And I did it anyway. He talks about his own suffering. How lonely he is. How much he's lost. But here's what's missing. There's no mention of Shannon. No true sorrow for Bella. No aching for Celeste. Just him. His pain. His loss. His regret. Is this remorse? Or self-pity? Experts have analyzed his words, his letters, his so-called transformation. And many agree, Chris Watts isn't grieving his family. He's grieving his freedom. Dr. Anna Salter, a forensic psychologist, describes men like Watts as masters of deception. They can mimic emotions. They can say all the right things. They can even convince themselves that they feel guilt. But true remorse? That comes with accountability. And Chris Watts? He still downplays what he did. He says he was taken over. He blames stress, exhaustion, the pressures of life. Not once does he own his choices. So, is this a man searching for redemption, or just another manipulator trying to rewrite his story? There's one chilling detail that no one can explain. Inside his cell, beneath the cold concrete, under the flickering fluorescent lights, Chris Watts keeps photos of his family. A picture of Shannon. Of Bella. Of Celeste. Hung up on the wall. Why? Does he stare at them in guilt, or nostalgia? Does he miss them? Or does he miss the life he destroyed? Is this his way of punishing himself, or is it something even darker? Does he see them as victims, or possessions he lost? Chris Watts claims he has changed. But can a man like him ever change? Or is this just another lie? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the darkest minds of true crime, subscribe. Because this story is far from over. Chris Watts claimed to have told the truth. He sat across from investigators, hands shackled, voice trembling, and said, "This is everything." But is it? Because even now, behind those prison walls, there are whispers that Watts still hasn't told the full story. Shannon's family doesn't believe him. Investigators don't believe him. And true crime experts? They say his confession felt rehearsed. Too smooth. Too calculated. He says he killed in a moment of rage. That it wasn't planned. But does that make sense? A man who methodically covered his tracks. Who texted his co-workers like nothing happened. Who carried out his daughter's bodies, one by one, before calmly driving to work. That doesn't sound like a man who snapped. That sounds like a man with a plan. And yet, Watts has never fully explained why he did it. Why he killed his daughters after his wife was already dead. Why he lied for days. Why he still won't talk about certain details. Is it guilt? Or is there something darker he's still hiding? Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences. No parole. No appeals. A forever prisoner. Some say he deserves worse. Inmates have tried to attack him. he's a walking target. And yet, he's been given protective custody. A small room, separate from the general population, away from the danger. Ironically, the same system that condemned him, now keeps him safe. But is that really a life worth living? Day after day. Year after year. Alone. Forgotten. Despised. No family visits. No love. No second chances. Chris Watts once said he wanted to start fresh. Now, he wakes up every morning in a cage. Chris Watts thought escaping his marriage was worth his family's lives. Now, he's trapped in a nightmare of his own making. No escape. No freedom. No way out. And maybe the cruelest part? Every single night, when the prison lights go out, he's alone with his thoughts. The last thing he sees before he sleeps. The faces of the people he betrayed. Do you think Chris Watts told the full truth? Or is there still something he's hiding? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more true crime stories that dive deep into the darkest minds, subscribe. Because this case is far from over.